Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments on a calendar that look ordinary, but in the realm of the unseen they are marked with divine ink, moments when heaven leans forward, when purpose accelerates, and when what you didn't plan for suddenly plans for you. Tonight, we are not gathered by coincidence, and this message is not arriving by accident. There's a reason your spirit feels alert, your heart feels stirred, and your expectation is rising beyond logic. We often prepare for what we can predict, but the most powerful blessings are never announced in advance. They arrive quietly, interrupt routines, and override assumptions. You've been praying for answers, working through resistance, standing firm when nothing seemed to move. What you didn't realize is that the delay was not denial. It was divine alignment. There are seasons when nothing changes on the surface, yet everything is shifting beneath your feet. Faith is not the ability to see what's coming. Faith is the courage to stand ready when you don't. And there are moments when God doesn't warn you, because preparation would interfere with surprise. There are blessings that only activate when you stop striving, when you release control, and when you trust that timing is not your responsibility. You are standing on the edge of such a moment. December 20th, 2025 is not just a date. It is a threshold. It is a divine intersection where obedience meets opportunity, where endurance meets reward, where the unseen becomes undeniable. What you thought was ordinary will suddenly carry extraordinary weight. What you assumed was over will receive new breath. What you believed passed you by will circle back with greater force. Tonight, allow your spirit to open wider than your circumstances. Silence the voices that say not yet or not for you. This is a moment to lean in, to listen deeply, and to align boldly. Because when God activates a blessing you didn't see coming, it doesn't just change your situation. It redefines your future. There are moments that pass through our lives quietly, unannounced, without thunder or spectacle, and yet they carry the weight of destiny within them. We are often trained to look for God in the dramatic, the loud, the obvious, but divine activation frequently disguises itself as routine. It shows up in ordinary days, familiar rooms, repeated prayers, and predictable schedules. Nothing appears different on the surface, yet something eternal is being triggered beneath the visible layer of life. What seems like just another morning can be the moment heaven initiates movement on your behalf. The danger of the ordinary is not that it lacks power, but that it feels too familiar to expect change. When days start to look alike, hope can quietly fall asleep. You keep showing up, keep believing, keep doing what faith requires, even when results feel delayed. But unseen activation does not need your awareness to function. God does not wait for your recognition to begin his work. While you're focused on surviving the day, he is rearranging outcomes. While you're managing responsibilities, he is recalibrating timelines. Many miss divine activation because they are waiting for a signal that matches their expectations. They want clarity before movement, confirmation before obedience, evidence before trust. But faith is often tested in subtlety. The activation is already happening while you are questioning whether anything is happening at all. That phone call you almost ignored, that conversation you didn't plan, that interruption you found inconvenient, that decision you made simply to stay obedient. These moments carry more power than they appear to hold. Ordinary moments become sacred when God steps into them. A routine act of faith can unlock supernatural acceleration. You didn't feel different when you prayed, but something shifted. You didn't hear a voice, but a door quietly began to open. You didn't sense immediate relief, but resistance started losing its grip. Divine activation does not always announce itself with emotion. Sometimes it arrives with stillness, trusting that alignment does not need noise to be effective. There are seasons when God hides his greatest work inside repetition. You wake up, you work, you wait, you worship, and nothing seems to change. But repetition builds readiness. Consistency prepares capacity. What feels like monotony is often maturation. God is strengthening your endurance so that when activation fully manifests, you'll be able to carry what is released without collapsing under its weight. Unexpected activation challenges the belief that breakthrough must be dramatic. Some of the most powerful shifts occur when nothing external changes at first. Your environment stays the same, but your authority increases. Your circumstances remain familiar, but your position in the spiritual realm is elevated. Heaven moves before earth responds. Alignment always precedes manifestation. This is why faith must remain alert even in the ordinary. You don't know which step activates movement, which prayer triggers acceleration, which act of obedience releases momentum. God does not waste moments. He repurposes them. The day you felt unnoticed may have been the day you were marked. The season you labeled insignificant may have been the one that positioned you perfectly. Divine activation is rarely predictable, but it is always intentional. God specializes in surprising his people, not confuse them, but to remind them that his power is not limited to expectation. When blessing arrives unexpectedly, it carries a signature of grace rather than effort. It proves that what you couldn't orchestrate, God already scheduled. Waiting is one of the most misunderstood experiences in a life of faith. When progress slows or outcomes seem distant, the human mind often labels a season as denial, rejection, or failure. But delay is not a divine refusal. It is frequently a strategic pause designed for alignment. God is not withholding because he is unwilling, but because timing determines sustainability. What arrives too early can damage what was meant to bless, and what is released without alignment can become instead of a breakthrough. Alignment involves more than circumstances. It includes character, capacity, wisdom, and spiritual posture. While you are counting time, heaven is calibrating details you cannot see. Relationships are being repositioned. Opportunities are being rerouted, and internal strength is being fortified. Delay is often God's way of protecting you from premature exposure to responsibility you are still becoming ready to carry. What feels like stagnation may actually be preparation happening at a depth that progress cannot yet reveal. There are moments when God must slow the pace to save the purpose. If everything moved as fast as desire demands, discipline would never develop. Discernment would remain shallow, and endurance would never be tested. Delay teaches you how to trust without evidence, how to remain faithful without reward, and how to worship without confirmation. These lessons are not secondary. They are foundational. Alignment is built through consistency, not convenience. When you assume delay means denial, discouragement takes root. You begin questioning your calling, your prayers, and even your worth. But God does not measure worth by speed. He measures readiness by alignment. The blessing has a schedule, but so do the elements required to sustain it. Your ability to steward what is coming must match the magnitude of what is being released. Delay allows the internal to catch up with the external. Alignment also requires a removal of what no longer fits. Some connections cannot go where you are going. Some habits must lose influence. Some perspectives need correction. If God released a blessing before these adjustments occurred, it would pull you backward instead of pushing you forward. Delay creates space for separation, refinement, and redirection. It is not punishment, it is precision. There is also an unseen coordination happening beyond your personal timeline. God is not working with just your clock. He is synchronizing multiple lives, purposes, and promises at once. What you are waiting for may be waiting on someone else to move into position. Alignment ensures that when the door opens, everything connected to blessing arrives in harmony rather than chaos. Delay tests patience, but it also strengthens discernment. You learn to listen more closely, to move more intentionally, and to depend less on urgency. Faith matures in the waiting. Confidence deepens when you choose trust over timelines. Alignment reshapes desire so that when fulfillment comes, it does not replace God but reflects him. What you thought was being postponed may actually be progressing invisibly. Heaven often works in silence before it moves in power. Delay refines motives, sharpens obedience, and anchors humility. It prepares you to recognize the blessing when it finally appears, not as something you forced, but as something perfectly timed and divinely aligned. Faith is often misunderstood as confidence in outcomes, but true faith is confidence in God when outcomes remain unseen. It is easy to trust when there is a plan, a timeline, or visible indicators that something is about to change. But faith reaches its highest expression when there is no preview, no warning, and no evidence to lean on. It is the posture of readiness and uncertainty, the decision to stay open even when nothing suggests you should. Faith does not require prediction. It requires positioning. Many people believe preparation is about control, about ensuring everything is mapped out before movement begins. But there are blessings that cannot be prepared for intellectually because they are designed to bypass logic. These moments arrive without notice, interrupting routines and rearranging priorities. Faith is what allows you to recognize the moment instead of resisting it. When you are faith positioned, you don't need advance notice to respond correctly. Your spirit is already aligned to say yes. Faith trains you to live alert, not anxious. It keeps your heart flexible rather than rigid. When life conditions you to expect disappointment, faith keeps you expecting possibility. You may not know what God is about to do, but faith convinces you that whatever he does will be good, timely, and purposeful. This kind of faith is not passive. It is actively trusting without demanding details. There are moments when preparation would actually interfere with reception. If you knew what was coming, fear might talk you out of obedience. Doubt might convince you that you are unqualified. Overthinking might delay your response. Faith removes the need to analyze what God intends to do. It allows you to move when logic would prefer pause. Blessings that arrive unexpectedly often require immediate obedience, and faith is what equips you to act without hesitation. Faith also keeps you from limiting God to your expectations. When you plan too tightly, you unknowingly restrict how God can move. Faith leaves room for divine creativity. It acknowledges that God's solutions may look nothing like what you imagined. What you expected to arrive one way may come through an entirely different door. Faith doesn't cling to form. It trusts purpose. Positioning is not about knowing the future. It is about being aligned in the present. Faith positions you emotionally, spiritually, and mentally to receive without panic. When something unexpected arrives, faith keeps you grounded instead of overwhelmed. It allows you to recognize blessing rather than question worthiness. Faith reminds you that if God released it, you are ready for it. There are blessings that only activate when you stop striving to predict them. When you release the need to understand everything in advance, you make space for surprise. Faith allows God to move faster because he doesn't have to convince you at every step. Trust accelerates response. Surrender eliminates resistance. Faith also protects you after the blessing arrives. Unexpected favor can be disorienting. Sudden opportunity can expose insecurity. Faith anchors you so that you don't self-sabotage what you prayed for. It reminds you that God did not make a mistake choosing you. It sustains humility while strengthening confidence. When you live by faith, you're never caught unprepared. Even when you are surprised, your readiness is internal, not circumstantial. You are not waiting for signs. You are staying aligned. Faith is the quiet agreement that whenever God decides to move, you'll be ready to receive, ready to respond, and ready to walk forward without needing to see the entire path first. Dates are often treated as markers of memory, reminders of the past, or tools for planning the future. But in the spiritual realm, certain dates carry weight far beyond their appearance on a calendar. They function as thresholds, moments where time and purpose intersect, where what has been building in the unseen is authorized to manifest in the visible. A date can be ordinary to the eye, and yet monumental in assignment. It is not the number that holds power, but the divine intention attached to it. A threshold represents transition. It is the space between what was and what is about to be. When you stand at a threshold, you are not fully in the old season, but you are not yet immersed in the new one. This is often the most uncomfortable position because it demands faith without familiarity. God frequently works at thresholds because they require surrender. You cannot carry everything from the previous season into the next. Some things must be released, not because they were wrong, but because they are no longer required. December 20th, 2025 represents more than a point in time. It symbolizes a moment of authorization. Before manifestation, there is always permission. Heaven does nothing randomly. What unfolds on a specific date is often the result of prolonged preparation, obedience, and endurance that preceded it. You didn't arrive at this threshold suddenly. You were led here intentionally, step by step, through lessons, delays, adjustments, and growth. Threshold moments demand awareness. If you treat them as ordinary, you risk stepping through without recognizing what has shifted. Awareness does not mean pressure. It means alignment. It means paying attention to what God is emphasizing internally, rather than what circumstances are displaying externally. Often the greatest change at a threshold happens within you before anything changes around you. At thresholds, old patterns lose authority. What once limited you no longer has permission to follow you forward. Fear, hesitation, and insecurity may ride the cross with you, but they do not belong in the next season. A threshold is not just an entrance. It is a boundary. It separates who you were from who you are becoming. God uses these moments to establish identity before he releases assignment. There is also a heightened level of spiritual activity at thresholds. Resistance often intensifies because opposition recognizes transition before manifestation occurs. Confusion, distraction, and doubt attempt to pull focus away from what is opening. This is why discernment is critical. You must learn to recognize when pressure is not a sign of failure, but confirmation that movement is near. Crossing a threshold requires courage, not certainty. You may not have all the details, but you have enough direction to move forward. God rarely explains everything at once. He reveals just enough to require trust. Thresholds teach you how to walk by faith rather than familiarity. When a date is divinely marked, it does not force change. It invites participation. God honors willingness. He does not drag you into the next season. He leads you. How you respond to the threshold determines how you experience what comes next. Alignment turns transition into empowerment. Resistance turns it into struggle. The threshold itself does not bless you. Your obedience within it determines what activates beyond it. Some of the powerful blessings in life are not the ones we anticipate, but the ones hidden beneath seasons we misunderstood. They are concealed within silence, disguised by routine, and overshadowed by disappointment. While attention is fixed on what did not happen, God is often developing what will matter most. Hidden blessings do not announce themselves early because their purpose is not to impress the moment, but to transform the future. A blessing that remains hidden carries a different kind of strength. It is not dependent on validation or approval. It does not require external confirmation to exist. While visible success can shape reputation, hidden blessing reshapes identity. It works internally before it ever manifests externally. God often conceals his greatest work until the right moment, so that when it appears it cannot be credited to strategy, influence, or timing alone. Hidden blessings often develop during overlooked seasons. Times of waiting, obscurity, and perceived stagnation are fertile ground for transformation. When attention is low, pressure is reduced, allowing growth to occur without performance. God uses these moments to build resilience, deepen wisdom, and establish humility. What grows in secrecy often carries longevity because it was not rushed by expectation. Redefinition happens when a blessing challenges the narrative you've been telling yourself. You thought your story was about delay, but it becomes about preparation. You believed the season was about loss, but it becomes about refinement. Hidden blessings reframe your past and realign your future. They reveal that nothing was wasted, even the moments you wanted to forget. When hidden blessings surface, they don't just improve circumstances, they elevate perspective. You begin to see life differently, measure success differently, and respond to challenges differently. The blessing reshapes how you lead, how you serve, and how you trust. It doesn't simply add something to your life. It changes the lens through which you view everything. There is also a protective element in hidden blessing. God shields certain gifts until you are mature enough to steward them. Exposure too early can invite misuse, pride, or dependence on affirmation. Hidden seasons teach you how to remain grounded when recognition arrives. They anchor your identity and purpose rather than applause. When a hidden blessing finally emerges, it often arrives with momentum. What took time to develop can move quickly once revealed. The future shifts because the foundation is already strong. You don't have to scramble to sustain it because it was built slowly and intentionally. What once seemed delayed now feels perfectly timed. Hidden blessings redefine success by disconnecting it from visibility. They teach you that progress is not always public, and that impact does not require attention. God often does his deepest work away from the spotlight, so that when light finally shines, the work can stand on its own. When you look back, you realize that the hidden seasons were not empty. They were essential. They were shaping strength, refining faith, and preparing influence.